First of all, before I get started, I just wanted to shout out, I don't know if most of you know that, but the other job that I do when I'm not mayor is I'm a physician, and it is National Doctors Day today. And as a prelude to the next talk that I'm going to be doing on Sunday at 7 o'clock, I'm actually going to be speaking for the Wilf Assisted Living Facility and Campus for the Living. It's going to be a virtual discussion on the impending physician shortage here in New Jersey, which I think is a critical issue that we all need to be concerned about, because there are things that we can do now to prevent what I believe is the obvious. So if you have an opportunity, go on to Wilf Campus for the Living. They have the link for that talk, and if you're interested at all, it's Sunday at 7 o'clock. I also want to, before I get started, thank the Chamber for everything that they're doing to make East Brunswick a much more competitive and attractive town for business. That doesn't happen overnight. That's a vision, that's a plan, and they are implementing it along with the township, and that's why these type of events are growing. That's why you see businesses opening up every day. We are one of the few municipalities in the state that actually saw an increase in businesses coming into town during COVID, when most businesses were closing. So I think that we're doing something right, and so we just need to keep that process going, and that's really what I wanted to talk to you about today, which is the process of redevelopment and where we're going. Because if you don't already have a plan for where you're going next, then you're already behind. And so this is the talk of today is about redevelopment in East Brunswick 2.0. Where do we go from here? Now, I don't know if most of you remember, I would think you do, back in 2017, how many remember that Amazon was looking for a second headquarters, and they were putting out an RFP to the entire country for that, for every town, municipality, or city to bid for that second headquarters. Do most of you remember that? Yeah, well, that's when I was already starting to think about redevelopment 2.0. Back in 2017, before most people even knew what redevelopment 1.0 was about. And if you actually went on, you can actually still do that today, you can Google RFP for Amazon's second headquarters, and you will see that they were very specific in the things that they were looking for if you were to apply to Amazon and for consideration. Very, very specific. And so I want to go through some of those because they're enlightening. First thing they wanted a township, municipality, city that was within 30 miles of a metropolitan center that was over 1 million people. The second thing they wanted, it wasn't in this order, they wanted a community that had a stable, business-friendly type of community. They wanted to be wanted. They also wanted, and it didn't care if it was a suburban or an urban location, but they wanted a place that had the ability to attract strong technical talent. They didn't want to have to search for it. They wanted it there in their backyard. They also wanted communities that thought big, out of the box, create creatively. They needed a community that was going to be within 45 minutes of an international airport. Why? Because people would be flying all over the country to the headquarters. They didn't want them to take all day to get to their headquarters, wherever they were located. They also wanted, and as you recall, they were looking for a ton of office space. It was never going to be in one location. So they knew they were going to have multiple buildings, multiple spots. Every one of them had to be within a easy distance to mass transit, whether that was a bus, a train, railroad, subways. It didn't really matter, but you had to have that. That was a requirement. The other things that they were looking for was they wanted to have an area that was diverse. We're all working in a global economy right now, so having the community around you diverse was a strength, and that's something that was high on their list. They also wanted to have in the background areas where there were excellent institutions of higher learning, whether they were at the public schools that many of their employees would put their kids into, or universities in their backyard. That was an important feature, and it's also a source where they could find talent. The other thing that they wanted was a government, that local government and elected officials that were eager to work with the company. And so it kind of explains why they pulled out of Brooklyn, because clearly they ended up encountering trouble with elected officials, and so they just cut their ties. But that was an important feature. And they wanted an area that had lots of recreational opportunities to be able to provide for their employees lots of things to do when they're not working. They wanted areas where there were educational opportunities and high quality of life scores, which, however you define that, services, connectability, walkability, the ability to have healthcare services at easy access. That was important. So all of those were part of their RFP. And clearly there were a ton of companies, ton of towns, ton of cities that applied, including New Brunswick. Now, God bless Chris Palladino and Devco and Mayor Cahill and the county. They've done an immense job turning around New Brunswick. I could tell you that with certainty because as a resident back in 1986, when I started working at Robert Wood in St. Peter's, you didn't want to walk in New Brunswick. It's a totally different place than it was then. And they've done a monumental job turning that around. And they're still in the process of continuing to do that. But as much as there's some wonderful things about New Brunswick, there's some really not so great things about New Brunswick either. Try driving in and out of New Brunswick or trying to figure out where to park. It's a nightmare. I always tell my office staff, don't schedule me a surgery in the middle of the day. I want it at the beginning of the day before the kids are out, or I want it later in the day when after rush hour's over. It's the next town to us, and I can't stand getting in and out of New Brunswick. So they put in an application for the Amazon second headquarters, and look, it was a great exercise in learning how to attract companies, and they didn't end up securing it. But what I realized at that time was that if you take the camera lens and make it a little bit wider and start to include areas like East Brunswick in the immediate region, all of a sudden, every one of the things that Amazon was looking for in that RFP could be found if you just stop trying to compete with one another and you actually look at the area as a region. At that time, one of the towers was completely empty. Amazon could have filled that in an instant and put a big goddamn sign on the top so you could see it from miles away. They could have done that if you just looked at the region and not at just New Brunswick. So, teaches you something about applying for these type of companies. And we didn't get the Amazon contract, and maybe wouldn't ever have gotten it, but you have to learn something in the process. Every company in the world isn't as big as Amazon. In fact, the vast majority of them aren't. I'll take my share of the thousands that aren't, but it teaches you something about the next time we go out to an RFP or try to attract businesses of that stature to this area. So before we talk about redevelopment 2.0, I think we need to just kind of make ourselves clear on what 1.0 is, because we're in the middle of that right now. And that's the work that we've been doing for the last couple of years. And it centers on three main concepts. First, we got to remove the blight that's on Route 18. I mean, it's embarrassing. You drive by some of these buildings where there are squatters that are living in them. They're mold infested. They are doing nothing to increase property values around it. All of them are applying for tax appeals because they were all taxed at as if they were 100% occupied, which they haven't been in years, and they will win every one of those tax appeals, and many of them have already. And our police know that if there's going to be crime committed in East Brunswick, you're probably going to find it over there in these blighted areas, which tend to be the places where drug busts and prostitution and things of that nature take place. They know that. You don't hear about it because we have a phenomenal police department that gets rid of it before you see it, but they know where they need to be. That had to go. That was item number one. Item number two was that we still had in 2016 an affordable housing obligation because New Jersey is an extraordinarily expensive state to live in, and the courts have imposed on every township in all of New Jersey affordable housing obligations that we entered into a settlement, and we need to fulfill that. On top of the fact that there's just a housing shortage in New Jersey to begin with. It's one of the rare times in development history where the needs of developers and the needs of fair share housing happen to overlap because there's demand for both right now. And so that led us to some of the projects that you see starting to go up right now. And then finally, is that the Route 18 corridor is a vestige of a generation that is gone. And we need to recognize that and start to move forward. The age of retail has changed. Many of the retail that was on 18 either moved to nicer areas outside of Route 18 or they just don't exist any longer because people don't buy in retail stores and brick and mortar stores anymore. They buy online. That's how they shop. So you have to fundamentally change what the nature of Route 18 is. And as you can see, it's moving more towards a recreation service type of corridor from the retail. Doesn't mean there's going to be no retail. It just isn't the same retail it was before. I remember when I became mayor, literally within the about first week, Kmart closed. And the reporter from the Home News called up and said, "Mayor, what do you think about this? Isn't this horrible?" I said, "No. I'm thrilled." She goes, "What do you mean people are losing jobs?" I said, "People have been losing jobs. That is a dying dinosaur right in front of your eyes. It's been doing it for the last for the last decade. Finally, somebody put a fork in it, and it's going to eventually move to whatever the next version, the next stage is. That'll happen. Markets do that. Let the markets do what they need to do." And that's happening. You could see right now what it became. So that's the 1.0. Now we really need to look into what's 2.0, the point of today. So what I want to start talking about in order for you to understand what Redevelopment 2.0 is to talk about a lot of the things we've been doing here in the township, a lot of the things that I've been working on that you might not think actually connect to one another. And there's a lot of things that are going on, and at some point we need to put in that connective tissue, and once we do that, you'll see that all of these things actually define what 2.0 is. So let's talk about what's in the universe, what's out there. Well, first of all, let's all recognize that every one of the features that Amazon was looking for in its second headquarters, we have in this region. It's already here. We don't need to recreate or import things that we already have. So let's take advantage and recognize what we have in our toolbox. The second thing is our workforce. The professional workforce in East Brunswick is comprised of several sectors: the healthcare, IT, finance, education, biotechnology, and pharmaceuticals. They're right here. And don't make any mistake about it. When companies are looking for talent, that's actually more important to them than the rent they have to pay. I'm not saying they want to pay skyrocketing rents, but it's a far more important feature than squabbling over rent. The recreation services that we have in this town and the surrounding area is second to none. We have 11 parks right here in East Brunswick. Most people don't know about them. We have the Route 18 recreation areas that are being built right now. Some are already there, some are being built. I know many of you have read about the ice rink that we're going to be doing. RFPs will probably end up going out in June, and we expect to make a decision by the fall and start building by the end of the year so that it could be open by the end of '24. That's a pretty aggressive timetable, and I don't intend to be behind. We also have indoor recreation facilities. We have, everybody's been asking me when the bowling rink's going to open by Aruga's. It's actually not a bowling rink, it's an indoor recreation of which only one part is bowling, and the answer is that there's families squabbling over the people that own it, and they're actually suing one another. Has nothing to do with the town. So shocker. We also have 2 tennis courts on either side of Route 18, 2 indoor tennis centers, and more. In Mid-State Mall, the old bowling alley is going to be converted into indoor swimming, so that we can finally have some sort of indoor swimming facility here in town. And Mid-State Mall has also recognized that, look what's going on across the street with Vermella. Maybe we better up our game. So they're new owners. They're refacing the whole place. They're putting in higher-end retail. They're really investing because they know darn well that if they don't do that, where are they going to go? To my friends over here who are building right across the street. So they know that. That's exactly what redevelopment was supposed to encourage the retail in the town to do, upgrade. We also have an incredible amount of effort on the arts here in East Brunswick. And if many of you hopefully read the article this week, Estelle Goldsmith, resident of East Brunswick, just this week turned 100. And Estelle moved here in 1957, before I was even born. And when she moved here, her friends in Manhattan said to her, "What are you moving to this vast wasteland of nothing out in New Jersey when you're coming from the city in Manhattan and all the richness of the culture that's there? Why are you doing that?" And so she set out on a path from day one moving to East Brunswick to change that. So the Arts Commission that we have in town, she's the emeritus president, started it. She started the Historical Society, the Museum Corporation, and she's spent hours and hours of her time committing herself to improving and encouraging the arts here in East Brunswick to what we have today. And even in the 70s, when I grew up in Parsippany, and I guess I was one of those band geeks, and I was competing for all-state band and all-state orchestra, and I knew that if you went into a room and you were competing, if you had kids from Parsippany Hills High School, which is where I went to school, or Cherry Hill West, or East Brunswick High School, you better watch out because these people are well trained and they're probably the only people in the room who could beat me. That was known back in the 70s. It's only improved more and more, and we've got a lot going on with the arts. We're looking to expand the Community Arts Center. The governor has also in his budget given us money towards doing that. We'll have a black box theater. We're going to have a full outdoor theater that could be an appeal to people much more than just East Brunswick, far more wide-reaching. And we also have an East Brunswick Arts Coalition, which is raising money to support all the cultural and art events that go on in town. Human Relations Council, Playhouse 22, the Museum Corporation, and they will be the main fundraiser for the expansion of the Community Arts Center because as a nonprofit, you could donate to the East Brunswick Arts Coalition and have it be a tax-deductible donation, which you could not do if you donated to the township. So it's all very intricately thought about years ago. We've been thinking about this for a long time. We also have a major medical corridor here. Most of you who live around here know that Cranberry Road was called the Medical Mile years ago. Every doctor that I could think of has an office on Cranberry Road. On either side of Route 18 are major hospital centers. In New Brunswick, you have Robert Wood and St. Peter's. Robert Wood's part of the Barnabas healthcare system. On the other side, you have Old Bridge Regional, which is now part of the Hackensack Meridian healthcare system. Robert Wood is intending to build out a remaining empty space at the Kmart building to put a facility there that's about 60,000 square feet. Route 18 already has 3 urgent care centers. We are a medical corridor. Again, look at all the lists on that RFP. And then, of course, Route 18 ties New Brunswick to the shore. We have all of that at our disposal. It's right here. So what else is out in the universe? We have a lot of housing stock. And while housing cycles follow cycles just like the markets, we have single-family homes of all price points right here in East Brunswick. We have apartments, we have townhomes, we have a ton of opportunities for people to move here, before you even think about the building that we're already doing right now. That was planned, because if you're going to move people into an area, you have to have a place for them to live. Recently, we met with the Middlesex County because Middlesex County was planning on, and most of you may have read about the hub that they're building in New Brunswick, which is going to be a technology-driven center very much across the street from the university, the hospital system, and right in front of the train station in New Brunswick. The medical school will be moving there. There's going to be incubation space, a lot of biotechnology. All of that's moving there. But just like I said earlier about New Brunswick, they finally dawned on them that guess what? We're going to bring all this talent into New Brunswick, and you can't get the hell in and out of New Brunswick, and you can't park. So they called us and they wanted to know what we could do about maybe sharing the parking decks that we have in East Brunswick with the concept of what they're doing in New Brunswick, and maybe set up kind of shuttle. Well, at the same time, the Russo project, which is the Vermella project that is going to be done on Route 18, had also purchased and the Sears building on the other side of the Turnpike and Route 1, which is also going to be a Russo project, and announced in their announcement that they would provide a shuttle for their residents to get back and forth from the train station or the bus stations in New Brunswick to kind of set up a transit type of ability for their own residents so they didn't have to deal with Route 18 traffic. Well, guess what? Maybe that was an opportunity to marry the developer with the county, because clearly we all know about Route 18 traffic, especially now that the work's being done on the highway. That's something we're going to have to contend with. Maybe putting our developer together with the county, we can come up with a way of developing some kind of transit ability to get people back and forth so that we can mitigate the biggest complaint people have, which is traffic. We also, believe it or not, have space on Route 18 to park businesses if we're looking to attract them. How and where is that? Well, first of all, many of you are familiar, you've probably seen the really nice pictures of what we're looking to do on Route 18. It is a significantly different apartment type of complex from what you see being done up and down the state all the time, as every other town tries to meet their affordable housing obligation. This is designed specifically so that it really stood out from everything else that we see being done throughout the state. And I really applaud our redevelopment agency, our township, and the developer for coming up with a really unique design. However, if you are paying $3,000 a month to live in your apartment at Vermella, or you're swimming in the beautiful pool that's going to be there, and you look out onto Route 18, what do you see? You see the old PNC building, you see the strip mall where the Asian market used to be, a burnt out, it's not even utilized any longer, gasoline station, the Jack LaLanne that hasn't been occupied in almost a decade, and you see Motel 6, which if that went away tomorrow, I would not sit Shiva. You can clap for that one. That's what you see. So we have already started the designation process for redeveloping the site across the street, because it is an area that now we're looking to designate as in need of redevelopment, so that we can try to put that in, again, among the things that are in the solar system to think about as what 2.0 looks like. Many of you have read about the sister cities that I put together. One was with China, which didn't know in 2017 when we did that we'd be in the boat with China that we're in right now. So that was a great head start, really hasn't taken the second step quite yet. And I think we won't be ready to do that till things settle down. But we did one with Israel just end of last year with Yavne, Israel. And we're looking to do one in India. Now, there's a lot of benefits that you get out of sister cities, and we write up a lot about student exchange, and all that's great, makes for a great TAP article about how we're all getting together and trying to develop our student talent. But what I'm really after in trying to do that is the businesses. The business. These are places where there is swarming activity of businesses that all want to be in the American market. And let's not forget that the American middle class is the single largest economic powerhouse in the world still to this day. It still is to this day. And so everybody wants to be here. And what it interesting is it's not just IT, it's people working in the education space, the AI space, they're working in healthcare, they're working in sustainability, biotechnology, so many different areas. It's not just IT. It's much, much bigger to that. And a lot of those countries actually have representatives that are trying to get some of those companies space right here in the States. And what's interesting about foreign companies when they come to an area is all of a sudden the American companies wake up. Like, what is it that all of a sudden all these other companies are looking at space for in, I don't know, whatever town that they've moved to? Maybe we should look at that as well. It's almost like the younger sister that got married first, and all of a sudden the other one is like, ooh, I better get my act together. That's what happens when you start generating a buzz. Now, interestingly enough, I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to read that Wipro, which is one of the largest IT companies in India, recently took space in the towers. It is now their American headquarters is in the towers in East Brunswick. Let's recall that the towers are in East Brunswick, not New Brunswick. And if you actually go to the top of the towers, they took the whole floor so you can get a 360-degree view from being at the top of the towers. And what do you see when you're up there? And if you haven't had that opportunity, you should really do that, because you could see the turnpike as far as it goes. You could see all of East Brunswick. You could see all of New Brunswick. You could see Newark Airport. You could see Manhattan. It's the blessing of the location that we have right now, and sometimes you don't appreciate it until you stand and look at it from that vantage point. It is an asset. Interesting that without even working hard at this point to try to attract companies like that to come here, they've already started doing that. Many of you might not know of companies that are already here right now. Raritan Pharmaceuticals has 4 massive manufacturing buildings right off of Joanna Court, which is right off of Harts Lane. That company produces all of the generic over-the-counter medications that you could ever find, whether you're shopping in Walmart or CVS or Walgreens or Target. Tums, Pepto-Bismol, if it's made in a generic form, it's made in East Brunswick. Crazy what we have here and what other companies have already recognized. We just need to capitalize it beyond the ones that we know about already with them and the large financial businesses that are located in this area. United Insurance just announced that their regional headquarters is now being moved to the towers in East Brunswick. So they're already starting to notice these things. And interestingly enough is that these companies give back to the communities if you ask them. They are people that we could draw upon to help promote the things in the town that we want to accomplish without relying always on property taxes. Other areas in the country have capitalized on it. You could see on the screen here a lot of different cities that have worked on trying to attract businesses to their towns. But you got to plan. You can't just have it wake up one day and be happy that they're all here, because sometimes if you don't plan ahead of time, you end up with unexpected consequences. I had a patient that came into my office yesterday who has family living in Denver. And Denver is one of those places that went overboard trying to attract businesses over the last couple of years. And without planning, what ended up happening with this influx of talent is there was needed for places for them to live. And they didn't plan ahead of time. So cost of apartments, the cost of housing went up dramatically. And what did they end up with? A homelessness problem. In the last 5 years, the amount of money that Denver's budget is contributing to homelessness went from $70 million to $190 million. It now constitutes 54% of its annual budget. So if you don't plan, and look, all those companies, by the way, that were so happy to move to Denver are now starting to rethink that, because now all of a sudden it's not so safe to be in the streets, and they're worried about the increased crime level and the fact that there's so many homeless people that are there. And that's not to say that that can't happen anywhere. You just have to plan ahead of time. So for all the whining and the kvetching about the apartments that are going up, If we plan appropriately, you need to have space so that housing prices don't go off the rockers and we don't end up with unexpected consequences. We need to plan. You'll see that there's also places across the, and this isn't, there are way more, but I'm looking specifically at the areas that we were looking for sister cities simply because they have such a high degree of companies that are all looking to come here. But the difference between those and what I'm proposing here is that those are all individual towns or cities. The only place that I could think of which has thought about development from a regional standpoint is Silicon Valley. That's not a town. That's not one place. It's a region. And while I'm not going to say that their growth and their explosive housing prices hasn't resulted in unexpected consequences there, but it's not to the same degree that you see in some of the others who planned not at all. And it's a regional approach to their growth, which I believe is more sustainable, despite the bank issues that are going on right now. That's a temporary thing that I think will pass. But I think that what we need to start seeing is that all those things in the universe, if we start figuring out how the connective tissue can tie them all together, then I believe that the Raritan Valley could be the East Coast version of the Silicon Valley. We could absolutely do this. It requires vision. It requires people who are willing to put the time and the effort into making sure that it happens. But nothing happens unless you can't see it. And my goal here today is to give you the opportunity to see what is out there and where we could be. And that is Redevelopment 2.0. And so if you take the words of General George Patton, you have three options. You could either lead me, follow me, or get the hell out of my way. And I just assume that if you don't want to follow me, then get the hell out of my way. That's 2.0.